Hey guys! Welcome back to Makeup Tales. My name is Jacqueline. I typically post a weekly video on Tuesdays while I do my makeup, but I also want to bring you more scary content that I find throughout the week and I am passionate about. Along with my makeup and scary story videos, I will also post just scary story narrations. The following 3 stories are from Reddit user Vladimir Putin Real. The link to the stories and the Reddit channel are listed down below. The user is also currently working on a book of scary stories, so keep an eye out for it. Quiet waters. How much further must we travel? We've been out for much longer than I expected. The older man spoke nothing and continued paddling. The cool waters occasionally splashed Tamar's legs. The canoe had a long puddle of water in the center, which made their pants uncomfortably damp. "Sir, I must return home before midnight." Again, no response. The moon was hidden behind dark gray clouds, with only little rays of light shining through gaps. The ocean was lit a cool blue, and the only other sound than their breathing was the splish of the water on their canoe. They've been paddling for 30 minutes now, longer than Tamar had hoped for. He tried to see where they were going, but the land was far behind them, and a light fog covered anything near the horizon. He loved the smell of the night ocean, with chilling breezes pushing his hair back. Suddenly he felt a drop of water hit his forehead. Certainly that wasn't from the oars. Tamar looked up and felt a few more water droplets hit his face, and he realized it was starting to rain. "It's starting to rain." The old man looked back at Tamar, but said nothing and continued paddling. A moment later, Tamar shook his head and took a deep whiff of the air, his lungs dropping a few degrees. Then it came into view. His eyes set upon an island, surfacing not too far away from their canoe. There was a lit lantern on the shore, and its light showed the mouth of a cave on top of the beach sands. This large cave, about 20 feet tall and wide, sent shudders down Tamar's neck. The rest of the island was empty, not much bigger than the cave itself. It certainly didn't look natural. The canoe came to a quick stop once it hit the ground, and the old man tied it to a stick. They waded across the shallow waters before touching the dry sand, which clung to their wet clothes. He walked up the beach, little rocks poking his feet from underneath. The old man picked up the lantern and walked into the mouth of the cave, with Tamar following closely behind. The cave entrance glowed a light yellow, and its walls, Tamar noticed, appeared much wider inside the cave. The old man sped up greatly, and Tamar had to jog to keep up. The passage continued for minutes until the entrance was nothing more than a dotted light. They almost ran into rock at the end, and Tamar slipped on the wetted surface. The passage dipped down in a steep decline, and he hesitantly followed the old man down into the dark abyss of nothingness. There was a slight breeze down here. He imagined they'd be underwater by now, but this cave seemed otherworldly. The roof and walls got much tighter, while path curved steeply to the left and then leveled out. A dark red door stood in the way, and the old man opened it quickly. There appeared a long hallway with wooden walls. Carved into them were hieroglyphics and Egyptian-looking characters. They reached the end of the hallway, and there was a goat head set above the double doors at the end. Its fur was black, and the eyes glowed red. The lantern suddenly blew out with a random gust of wind, and Tamar felt an icy breeze pass through him. It was silent for a few seconds, until he asked, "Sir, please tell me what you're doing." He had a strong suspicion he was to be sacrificed down here. The old man began whispering some foreign language, and Tamar took steps back. It went silent, and then Tamar broke out in goosebumps when another whispering voice responded, seemingly from all around him. He felt disoriented and dizzy. Suddenly, the doors burst open, and a light red hue filled the hallway. He followed the old man into the room, which was lit by a small ring of red fire. Only to a certain spot, though. And then, pure darkness. The room's height, length, and width were unknown to Tamar. Inside the fire was a book that the old man picked up. Tamar shivered in the cold, unwelcoming atmosphere. The book was opened, and he flipped through several pages before speaking. "Tamar, you have been chosen. I have counseled with them, and you have been chosen." The old man now stared at him. "You are to replace me." Suddenly, the old man placed the book down. He softly said, "We made a deal many years ago. God punished the world, and we were destined to die along with the rest of the degenerate population. We did not, though. Our community still lives and thrives." He spoke much faster now, his voice sounding robotic and hostile. "We made a deal with the devil, Tamar. He saved us from damnation, but at a large cost. Our society is godless, Tamar. I watch after our communities and strike down any idea of God. Those poor, godless souls." The old man began weeping. "I have no choice but to teach our people of only the devil and his ways. In return, we get safety. You will take on my position and will not speak of this. You and our people will be ruined if the ideas of God return." The old man fell to his knees and stared at Tamar, who was shaking horribly. Tamar watched in horror as the old man's head was thrown back and a horrible choking scream escaped his throat. His arms flailed upwards, and his screams were then cut short. He began to float off the clay floor, up and over the fire. Everything was silent as the old man floated away into the darkness. Tamar wanted to shout, but his quivering denied him that. His head was cold and his knees were weak. The temperature dropped degrees rapidly now, and the fire began to die. With less and less staying visible. He jerkily looked behind himself, and the door had disappeared. He was standing alone in a small circle of red fire-given light. Tamar knew something was in the darkness. He was aware of its presence. The fire then went out, and he felt that same gust of chills pass through his body. Whatever was in the darkness was getting closer. He was surrounded. He heard the sounds. All around him, noises the human ears weren't meant to hear were being emitted from things Tamar didn't ever wish to see. He closed his eyes and fainted. He awoke on the beach outside of his community. He heard the voices of people in the town and stood up. He was back home. Tamar looked out into the ocean and saw nothing but the quiet waters he and the old man had left only hours ago. Night fevers. They rip at me every single night. I can't sleep well anymore. Each time I go to bed, no matter how happy my dream should be, they're there. It started when I was a kid. I was about 7, and these people started to show up on a nightly basis. I was a creative girl, and I remembered most of my dreams. I had a set sleep schedule and rarely got sick, so no, it wasn't psychological or anything. Most of my dreams took place in a fair I visited once, but sometimes I was alone in weird cities or even my own neighborhood. It didn't matter though, as they always were there. My dreams didn't allow me control, so I'd usually be walking around purposelessly. Sometimes I'd say weird things to people or do day-to-day activities, but I mostly just walked. If I was at the fair, these people would be hiding in the crowds. The only reason I remembered them was because they were always watching me. I'd look at them, and they'd be staring at me. In the cities, they'd be in windows, cars, or sometimes on the sidewalks. They never got close to me, though. They looked like normal people and wore normal clothes. The only strange part was that I couldn't remember any of their faces. They were always changing and were very indistinguishable. I never saw the same one twice. But I did know they were all tied together somehow. These dreams may sound silly, but if you had experienced them hundreds of times as a child, you too would have become both horrified and paranoid. Luckily, the dreams went away after my 16th birthday, and in the 13 years that passed, I almost forgot about them completely. Until a week ago, when they started again. Last night was quite literally the worst night I've experienced in my life. I dreamt I was in my neighborhood at dusk. The sun was below the horizon and everything was dark and blurry. I was standing in the road and was walking towards my home, which was the only house with lights on. There was no wind, and the only noise was my own footsteps. I passed my mailbox and walked up towards my front steps. I saw one of them in the window, watching me. A person sitting on the couch, my couch, looking through the window. I was terrified, but my dream pushed me forward quickly. I stopped at the front door and waited a few seconds. And then it opened. I went inside and the lights seemed a lot dimmer than usual. I saw another one of them in the kitchen, straight down the hall from the door. It was just standing next to the fridge. The one on the couch hadn't changed its position but continued staring at me. I began to walk up the stairs and saw yet another person at the top of them. As I climbed the stairs, the person walked backwards, down the hall to the left. I got to the top of the stairs and looked right, now looking at the door to my bedroom. I didn't turn around, but I knew the person behind me was still staring. This was a dream, however, and I didn't exactly feel fear right then. I approached my bedroom and turned the handle slowly. The door opened, and I noticed my room had no lights on. There was a person standing there in the middle of my bedroom. It wasn't staring at me, though, and when I looked over, I saw myself sleeping in my bed, curled up with my thick blanket. I tried to cry out, but I couldn't do anything. I looked up and saw another person lying on the ceiling right above my bed, looking down onto my sleeping body. My heart dropped and I turned around to run, only to find the other people in the doorway, peeking in through the open crack. I tried to scream again, but couldn't. It was the exact moment when I woke up, and my clock read 4 a.m. I was sweating, and my body was shaking. I couldn't think clearly for many seconds, and I was terrified to be in my own bedroom. Nobody else was there, but after witnessing that dream, I couldn't sleep in my own bed. None of it made sense. None of it even had to. I just knew I did not want to fall back asleep. As of right now, the time is 10 p.m. and I'm exhausted. I got no sleep last night, but my mind is pushing against sleeping tonight. I refuse to sleep. Dreamin'. I sat by the oak tree. It was a good tree. Ever since I was a little girl, I'd come here each day, a few times, and just sit. Sometimes read, but mostly just a lot of sitting. Daddy planted it when I was 3, and it's grown taller than me over the years. The bark is strong and firm, and the branches grow long. The shade makes weird shapes at noon, and the best part is the grass underneath. It's the longest and softest grass anywhere in miles, I swear. I got done crying since yesterday. I wasn't sick or nothing. My head really hurt though, and I know why. The tree taught me of my powers when I was 8. I looked at it hard enough, and I swear it grew. Maybe an inch, but it was tall enough that Mama was shocked when I showed her. Nobody believed that I made it grow, though. I tried again and again after that, but nothing happened for a while. Then I started thinking of the grass. I tried to make the grass grow longer and softer under the oak tree, and it worked. I swear it grew and softened somehow. I just thought, and it happened. I didn't tell Mama this time, though, but I tried to think of something funny that night. When dinner was being passed around, I thought of my brother tripping, and when I looked up, he tripped on a board and fell to his knees. I smiled, but kept it a secret. I didn't want to get in trouble. At school, I did a few pranks on my friends, and the kid nobody likes, Alice. She was always mean, so I thought of her hair being pulled during lunch, and she screamed at the kids behind her. I was laughing at my table. When I went home that night, Mama and Daddy were crying, a little at the table with lots of papers and money stacked up. I didn't want to say anything, so I asked my brother what happened. And he said we don't have much money for taxes. So I dreamed for a pile of money to come to the front door. And the next morning, there was a big stack of money in a bag sitting there. I didn't say anything though, as I didn't want to get in trouble. I did feel happy though. I was sitting at the oak tree a few months ago, and I thought something funny. What if the dog had wings? I thought a small picture of him with wings, and then I heard lots of whimpering. And when I looked up, he was rolling around and there was blood in the dirt. He had weird things growing out the back, and his face was super scary. So I ran inside and told Mama to hurry outside. I ran back out before her though, and I saw as the dog flew away. Of course, Mama didn't believe me and spanked me for making up stories. I had nightmares after that, thinking about the dog showing up to my window at night and breaking in. The thought of those bright yellow eyes and bloody wings made me sleep in my parents' room many times. Daddy questioned me about where the dog went for days, but I always told him the same thing, and he never believed me. I stopped using my thoughts after that. Yesterday, I was super tired and wanted to sleep, but Daddy gave me a lot of chores. I yelled at him, but he only gave me more, so I cried and ran outside. I looked out though, and I screamed. All of the trees in our yard, even my oak one, were cut down. A huge pile of wood lay on the side yard. I ran inside to scold Daddy, but it was no use. He was already gone off to work. I was angry, furious. I wished the whole world dead. I hated everybody. Then I heard a scream and a thump. I ran upstairs and saw my mama in a puddle of blood on her floor. She hit her head on the bed and was dead. My brother's room started to stink, and when I looked inside, he laid on the floor all pale and was staring at the ceiling. I started to scream and cry as I ran out front and yelled for Daddy. I ran down the road for hours, but I only saw 3 cars and everyone in them was dead. When I went back to the house, I felt sick and confused. The bodies were still there, and I wasn't dreaming. I then realized my mistake and wished everyone back alive again. I heard a few steps upstairs and was scared to go up, but I did. Brother was sitting on his bed looking at the window. He was still pale and scary looking. When he saw me, he started to make a horrible noise that sounded like a yell and a moan together. I started crying again and went to Mama's room, and she was standing in the doorway, all bloody and horrible. She was also pale and reached out to grab me, making scary noises. I ran downstairs and wished everybody gone. I wished it was just me. I slept in my bed last night, and when I woke up today, Daddy didn't come back home. I cried a little more, but didn't want to wish him alive or and here. I knew what would happen. I went outside and sat on the stump of the oak tree. That's where I am right now. But now I'm scared and don't know what to wish. My head hurts, but I know it's not a fever. I hope you enjoyed these scary narrations. I will catch you next time, and stay scary and glamorous.